Oh, we are live. Hello, everybody. I'm Alicia. It's my bestie, Becky. We're both
Hi.
writers. Today, we're going to be talking about publishing expectations, self-published, press run, querying, traditional publishing, the things we expect, things that maybe are true or not true. I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but yes. So I guess context first. Becky is a new writer. Um, I've published you a couple times, but short stories
Mhm.
only. Um, so this is your first book. You want to
Yeah.
talk about where you are in your journey a little bit?
Yeah. So I haven't worked on it in a few days because I've been really busy with company, but I think like 85,000 words into my manuscript. I'm writing an epic fantasy, and the world building was really intense. So that took up a huge chunk of time before I actually started writing. I started writing, I think, in March is when I began the manuscript itself. And in the meantime, I've started doing research, both, via Google and also via social media, following, agents and other people in the publishing industry, editors of various types with various specialties, and just picking up tips here and there. So, trying to kind of get an idea on what the querying process is going to look like, what to expect there, and then what to expect after you are agented if you get picked up by an agent. So that's in a nutshell where I'm at with this process. One that I keep intending to do a better job of documenting on my writer TikTok page, and I am absolutely horrible at it. But that's about where I am right now.
Okay. I guess context for people who don't know me and what I used to do. I mean, I have plenty of videos that show a lot of this stuff, but I've published 50 or so works total, if we include anthologies and stuff that I owned my own publishing press, in which I published a lot of short stories and a couple of books, both mine, my co-owners, and other people who had nothing to do with the press that I met through the press, which was great. But I self-publish, and I was an indie publisher, so like I have those two. I've done querying, and I've had like people read my book, but I found a distaste for that pretty early on because I'm a control freak and I want to do it all myself to make sure it's perfect. Well, we can talk about that in a little bit, but for context, that's where I am. And I'm also a ghostwriter. I'm an editor. I have worked as an editor for a long time, freelance as well. And I guess I kind of still do that a little bit. Not really. I'm mostly writing and doing and selling books. I sell books as a book box curator. So I'm in the world fully. I can't believe I get to say I get paid to write and read books. It's fantastic. It took a long time to get here because, I don't know if you
It
remember way
did.
back when I mean, 10 years of school,
Yeah.
2 bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and then teaching for a long
And
time
teaching.
English.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that's enough context to understand where I'm coming from. We're coming from two
Credentials.
very different places, which is really cool.
Yeah. But what's
So
also really cool is that you and I have been there for each other's journeys like the whole way. So, you've gotten to see your journey from first person and then mine from, a secondary, and vice versa, so we both get that kind of inside peek as we go forward further and further down this beautiful, disastrous rabbit hole that is the publishing industry.
it is. Oh, it's a fun. Betty and I often say to each other, like, if I didn't have the absolute drive to do this, I probably wouldn't do it because it's hard. It's fucking hard. But I don't think there's anything else I could do, honestly. So, more context for us. We've known each other since we were like 2. So,
Yeah.
if it seems like we know each other pretty well, that would be
We
why.
do.
She's my sister. That's just how that is. So, okay. So one of my questions, I wanted to know what your early expectations were when you imagined the publishing industry. And I know you're still early on in the process. Maybe what your current expectations even are.
I was going to say, how early do you want to talk? Because I don't know if you remember, but many, many moons ago, more moons than we care to count these days, there was a time when, when you and I were both very young and had talked about becoming, big time writers. And, I think our expectations there were a little bit over the rainbow.
I feel like most first time authors are there before reality.
Yeah.
Adulthood a lot of the times smacks you in
But
the
I
face.
think, I think that like my expectations now are not just, very simplistically much more realistic, but also adding in that, again, I've gotten to see your journey and, hear your opinions and your experiences. But also having put in my research. So my expectations are obviously vastly different than they were all those many moons ago. Right now, I think my greatest expectation is that, the querying process is going to be a bit of an emotional gauntlet. I'm not going into that with my head in the clouds. I very much expect this to be a lot of rejection. Am I going to handle that very well? I don't know. I've never done it before. So I'm trying not to place any expectations on myself in that regard.
I heard great advice about that specifically is in order to succeed, you have to collect a lot of no's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like looking
And,
at it
just
that
keeping
way.
in mind that, agents are people. They have not just the stuff that they specialize in as an agent, but also just their personal preferences. And that's going to influence a lot the manuscripts that they want to represent, which makes perfect sense to me. And, I understand that I am not, writing the next Harry Potter series or the next Game of Thrones. Like I'm not going to appeal universally. Even people who don't like the author love the world, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But part of that is just accepting that some of those people who are not going to be thinking that my manuscript is their cup of tea are going to be the agents that I'm going to query.
Mm-hmm.
I will say one thing that I didn't expect was how sort of overwhelming and confusing it can be to find a list of agents that are open to new queries and are actively taking on new clients, but also that are looking in the genres that that you're writing in and the subgenres that you can tag. And that whole process, you and I have talked about this before, that process is really damn messy. And is long since overdue for an overhaul. And you and I have shared our ideas on that. I think that there should be a much more streamlined process, and I think it's more than possible. Do I think it's going to be easy to convince people to do it? No. Why? Because even if it's a much better process, like objectively a better process, people don't like change.
Yeah.
But I think that's the big expectation right now is that, for as challenging as it can be to have the discipline, words are hard, the discipline to sit down and and write the manuscript and edit the manuscript and revise the manuscript and and pick it apart. As much as that can all be challenging, I think that the hard part for me is going to be going on query submissions and waiting for responses and dealing with those rejections and just doing it over and over and over again, and then trying to determine for myself, okay, when do I say enough is enough and bet on myself.
Now, here's a question for you, because I know you said traditional originally. Would you consider the in between? Because I know there's 3 steps, and a lot of people either think there's traditional or there's self-published, but there is that indie, and indie and self-published get switched around a lot. Indie just means independently published. So like I owned an indie press, but people weren't self-published when I published them, even though I wasn't traditional. Right. So like, would you consider that middle ground before going self-published, or would that be part of your traditional process, I guess?
I think for indie presses, I mean, obviously I'm not opposed to it because,
right.
But
some of the bill at least.
I think for me, like the big issue for me with indie presses is trying to sort of weed out the difference between indie presses and vanity presses. And like even I mean there was one that I had just kind of sent sort of like a looking for information request to, and they like it's weird because they are affiliated with one of the big five, but it's one of the ones where they want you to pay thousands of dollars for their editing and like yes, it just struck me really wrong.
Yeah, that's
Um,
you shouldn't have to pay for any.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to be paying thousands of dollars, I'm going to hire people on my own. Like I
Hmm.
yeah,
Exactly, and get what you want.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm not opposed to indie press. I am wary of
Scams.
scams, and that I think that in my experience, what I have seen, and now granted, I haven't seen a large slice of this yet, but what I have seen on the micro level so far is that a lot of indie presses have trouble distinguishing themselves in that space from a vanity press. And if you can't distinguish yourself, how is an author supposed to distinguish you?
I agree, and also it's hard to distinguish yourself as an indie press from self-publishing. That's why the words get mixed up so often. So I totally get that. I imagine there'd be at least a few out there that would fit into your process of querying. Some of them need agents and some of them don't. So if you don't
Mhm,
get an agent, that would be, I feel like, the next natural step for most people. And at the same time, always improving both your query letter and your manuscript or whatever it is, getting people to read it, building your audience, and eventually, if you need to go to the self-publishing as you're not your first route, then you have all of this stuff already in place.
mhm,
So it does make a natural progression. Um, I think I queried for 6 months. I got a lot of silence. I got a couple who wanted to read stuff and then no's before I was like, you know what? I want to make this cover over here I've been tinkering with, and I've been tinkering with this over here. And I was just like, screw it. Of course, this was 10, 12, nearly 12 years ago.
yeah.
Oh my goodness, I feel old. Um,
I thought we weren't going to name the number of moons.
well, when I published my first book was 12 years ago. So, and I was either, I think I just graduated or was about to graduate from my MFA program and was a new
Mhm,
teacher and was about to start my publishing journey as a publisher too. So I actually fell in love with doing all of the things and learning how to do all the things and then doing it for other people. So I know when I first started as a publisher and when I published my first book, I'm like, people are going to buy it. Nobody's going to buy your book. They don't know it's out there if you don't tell them it's out there. And I didn't tell anybody it was out there. So, like, nobody bought my book. That was a hard lesson to
I
learn
think that's
young.
like, I think that's the big draw for most debut authors, myself included, is that with traditional publishing, um,
You have a little bit more of
particularly
a
the big,
sounding board.
yeah, and particularly the big five, they already have they have a customer base. Even like, I mean, obviously, you don't have a whole lot of people who are like, I will only buy books from HarperCollins or whatever, but like, they know that like HarperCollins puts these authors out or
Mhm.
Penguin puts these authors out or where, whatever the case may be, and they like those authors. So, they go back. So those publishing houses have their indirect clientele that come back to them over and over again. And
And sign up for
not
their
just that
newsletters and
clientele, but also it comes with a broader range of opportunity
tools.
for earning tools and for earning potential, licensure agreements, adaptations, whatever the case may be. And I think that, unfortunately, because, with indie presses or self-publishing, you just don't have that network built, if you
Mhm.
don't attempt to traditionally publish, in a lot of ways, you're kind of limiting yourself in that regard. Um, but the flip side of that coin is that you have so much more creative freedom too. So, I guess it's just a matter of what's important to you as an individual.
There are a lot of like specifically for independent and self-published authors resources that don't I guess, help traditional as much because they're trying to help even the playing field. So,
Mhm.
BookBub used to be one of those, but now they do both traditional and indie. But there's a lot of smaller promo people who can help with the marketing and the advertising. And there's a lot more self-published indie friendly tools out there,
Mhm.
even more depending on how you feel about AI. Um, yeah, I know. Uh, but I mean AI for marketing specifically and promo stuff, not for writing your books. Don't use AI to write your books. Use it as a
No.
tool. But because
I
I
might
will
use it to come up with
sometimes
like a marketing plan or a marketing strategy, but I would never use it for like even editing. I wouldn't use it for, honestly.
I have seen something recently that did pique my interest, which was you upload, which scares this always scares me. Upload your book into an AI tool that specifically is meant to pull out hooks for you to make marketing videos with. That intrigues me because I don't know how the fuck to do that for myself. Like that's what's one of those things where I'm like, I know my whole story, and so how do I pick one thing that's going to help sell this to people? Usually, it's my 7 foot tall leprechaun's going to be your favorite next book boyfriend. Like that's that's all I've got. And people are like, "What?" I'm like, yeah, I actually sold a book on a train once, just talking about boating for 5 minutes. Um,
Nice.
but that kind of tool intrigues me specifically because it does something that I can't do. That
Right.
I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and I just suck at it. But I don't know why I got on that tangent. But there are a lot of I actually have a free TikTok video playlist. I should send you. It's a worksheet to work on TikTok stuff. Courses. That's the word I was looking for. Because again, words are hard.
Where's that go?
Yeah, but free course on how to do TikTok videos for authors. And I was like, yes, because I don't know how to do this either. I am too old for TikTok.
I'm just lazy about it. Like I get so focused on other things that I will forget about it, and then I'll be like, oh, you know what? I should make one of those. And then I'll think to myself, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow I'm all over the place all over again. And so it's my blog, it's my website, it's my TikTok, it's my Instagram, like all of that. Like I'm
Mhm.
so bad about updating them.
I will say one thing I learned in watching videos the last couple days because I beat myself about not being consistent. Um, Pick one thing to be consistent on and forget the rest of them because you just need that one place because it's too much otherwise. But anyways, we're really good at tangenting about these
We
things.
are.
Um, I did want to say that we talked a little bit about some of like the myths of you get published, you're going to sell 1 million books right away. There is this preconceived notion that traditional publishers have a big ad spend, a big marketing spend that they're going to spend on you if you sign, and that is also not generally the case. Will they do stuff for you that you wouldn't have access to otherwise? Yes, absolutely. But most of their spending is on those big people who already has followings. It's on sending Stephen King on a signing tour, Nora Roberts. So the people who already sell a lot of books, of course they're going to push their capital into something they know is going to make more profit.
Right.
I also know that recently a lot of readers in the communities that I participate in have been talking about how they keep paring down editors and how editors aren't able to do their job anymore in traditional publishing the way they should be doing. And I've seen the results of that, unfortunately, firsthand because I read a lot of traditional books for my job. And doing read-alongs and going, well, this sounded like a really good book, and the first quarter of it was fantastic, and the last 10% was really cool, but all that stuff in the middle where an editor should have gone through and been like, look, the pacing's off. We need to do this and this and this to help build character and build tension and keep your reader is not being done to a lot of books, to a lot of authors who don't already know how to do it. So fortunately, when you sell a book, it's kind of implied that you know what you're doing telling a story because somebody enjoyed it and they got it. But that's sometimes I feel like the authors are just like, oh, that was easy enough to read. We'll throw our hands up instead of trying to make it better because everything can be made better. I don't care who you are, what kind of author you are. If you handed me your book, I could probably make it better than it was before. That's my job. Just trained to do that. And it might be a struggle. There might be little things here and there, but I feel like those little things add up. So I get really frustrated with traditional publishing. And they've fired a lot of people. So the editors are so thinned out in traditional publishing that it scares me a
Yeah,
little
like,
bit.
and the process has gotten really, really long. Like from the time you start the query process to so what I've been hearing is that, from the day that you start querying to book on shelf can be like 3 to 4 years. And so, some of the advice that I've heard is, if you're looking at what are the things that are trending in book sales now, you're already 4 years behind.
Yep.
You need to be looking at what's going to be trending in 4 years.
Or just write a damn good book and not worry about what's trending.
Right. And I was like, oh, like some of the advice that I keep seeing from, from various editors and agents, and I'm just like, could y'all have made this any more difficult? Thank you very much.
I can tell you one thing. I won't let you start querying until I believe your books is the best that it can be. So, like, you don't have to worry about putting out a bad book.
I have absolute faith in you. I really do.
Ditto. Okay. Another thing I found funny was about, especially as an indie publisher, the first time I handed out a book deal, and somebody's like, "So what's my advance?" Honey, I don't have the money to pay you in advance.
Right.
And not that I'm saying it's impossible to get one. It's actually quite common to get an advance, but they're not as big on debuts because you're an unknown. Unless, of course, you have such a massive following already, usually for something else other than you writing a book that you're writing the book about.
Yeah.
It's not likely to happen. And then you have to make sure that you sell all of the books to equal that advance, or you're going to owe that money back. A lot of people don't know that either. They will take the money back from your advance if you don't sell the books. So
I've heard that that's not the case if you go with big house traditional publishing, because it is what it is. But with you're right, well, like, with some of the smaller presses or the indie presses,
maybe it hasn't been in a while, but I know they used to take it back. I hope that's changed, because honestly,
I don't know. Maybe I'll do some research on that, because I don't know.
We should do research on. I hear, I've never had to deal with traditional publishers, so I don't actually know, but I've heard horror stories.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say which publisher, but a publisher that I don't like working with in my other jobs. So for lots and lots of reasons.
Yeah. So there'll be some research there. But also, like, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. I just totally lost my train of thought.
Brain fart. It's all good.
I have too many kids.
I don't know my excuses.
I feel like the gatekeeping, and even if it's just because, like, even if it's not like necessarily intentional gatekeeping from professionals in the publishing industry, but because there's just like the dam has busted and everybody and their mother is submitting a book these days, and so things just get backed up. But I feel like that timeline has gotten so long, and depending on how long you're willing to leave yourself in the publisher trenches, it's difficult, because you're betting that, particularly if you're writing a planned series, right? And because I am.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got your book out there, you're talking about it online, and you're, as much as you can anyway, and you've got yourself an agent, but now they're trying to query publishers, and now you're working on book 2, not knowing if book 1's ever going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's still this, a similar concern as a self-publisher. But honestly, in some ways, I feel like with TikTok, that has sort of leveled that playing field for self-published and indie published authors. Like, I feel like there's a lot more conversation around those authors these days than there is around a lot of the big names. Obviously the big names are still there. You're still hearing a lot of, SJM and Rebecca Yarros and whoever else, but there's a lot of verbal traffic, I guess is a good way to say it, going on regarding newer authors, smaller authors. And I think one of the, going back to the whole creative freedom thing, I think one of the interesting things about being self-published is that you can take a risk on writing a story, whether that's a type of character. You've got your archetypes and then things that aren't necessarily common in any archetype, tropes that may or may not be common. You have the creative freedom to chase some of those that you might not see coming out of the big publishing houses because they're not willing to take the risk that it won't sell. Which just, again, boils back down to what factors are more important to you as the writer.
Right. I do want to say one thing about writing a series while you're waiting for traditional publishing, though. It is, if you are in a series, it's always good as soon as you submit your first one, start writing book 2. Because say you do get that deal on that first one, and it is 4 years later, you might have 4 books in the bank. And you go, well, look, the other one's already written. And then those can go out a lot faster than having to wait for them. Because I think a publisher is going to be way more interested if you already have book 2 written. And if say it takes 4 years and it's all no's, though, then you have 4 books to publish yourself.
And then you can publish on your own timeline. Which that is something that does intrigue me. Like if I manage to write most or all of a series and then publish book 1, then I have the opportunity to be like, I could write or I can publish every 18 months, close enough to keep reader interest up, but far enough along to, pull it out a little bit. But I think, and I did it again. I'm so sorry. It's been a long weekend. I think that my plan for book 2, I say that like I have any sort of a plan for book 2 at all right now. I have a couple of ideas. I don't have a plan. But as far as like the mechanics of the plan, I think is that, I'm going to finish book 1, finish my draft. And then I will go through and do my individual revisions and edits before I send it to you. And then once you have it, that's when I think maybe I'll take like a couple of days and then start hammering away at book 2 while you're working on weeding through book 1.
Sounds like a good plan.
Which the duality of that may or may not fry my brain. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it will take me a little while, especially if we're doing developmental editing. So
yeah,
that's okay. And honestly, those kinds of things that happen when you're doing an editing while you're writing, I feel like takes almost 2 different parts of your creativity in your brain. And so working on those things in book 1, if I like pose some things to you as I'm going through, might go, oh, hey, I didn't think of that. And now I have an idea for book 2, which is also a fun part of the process. So I'm hoping it's going to actually enhance the experience of writing book 2 versus hindering it. I'm going to try not to overwhelm you with things. I'm sure the thing I'm going to most abundantly, as we've said over and over again, is probably going to be the commas. So I'm probably not even going to suggest them to you. I'm just going to put them in there. I hope you don't care.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sounds good, right? Okay. Let's see. I'm looking at the questions that I had. Ooh, I like this question. What parts of the process seem most exciting or intimidating?
I mean, I think most authors would probably agree that the most exciting process, the part that seems the most exciting is probably, once it's in print and you've got your author copies and you're sitting at your first event and people are actually showing up to see you. And, that's probably what I think of when I think about, the most exciting portion of it. But again, yeah. And, yeah, I've always said I don't like the writing or editing part, but I love seeing my name in print, which is not entirely accurate, but because I do enjoy the writing part, but this one has been a very different process. So it's been a learning experience. As far as intimidating, I think, you could almost kind of say the same thing about intimidating that, you've got your name in print, the books are on the shelves, you show up to your first event and nobody shows up. Like that's a little intimidating because that can happen whether you're doing, traditional or indie or self-published. You can have that same problem either way. But if we're looking kind of like more at like a micro level, like sort of more of the immediate future and not way down the road, sitting at an event table, I think this is going to sound a little bit ridiculous. I think for me, the intimidating part is not so much looking for an agent, but more getting, because I've seen this happen in some of the groups that I follow on Reddit or, elsewhere, that, they might get an offer back from an agent and then they'll come back with, I'm really interested. I want to represent this book, but you need to change this, and this. And the next thing you know, they want you to write a whole new book and have nothing to do with what you originally wrote. Um, that's intimidating to me because I have spent a lot of, and just like any author, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of emotion. But for me personally, also a lot of, healing went into writing this book. And so, there's that fear that, and obviously, most people who read it aren't going to realize what went into it personally, but on an internal level, like feeling that rejection of something that I worked hard on, not just the book itself, but the mental state and the emotional state that went in behind it. That's a little scary.
Yeah. Essentially learning what people really think about your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary. Very scary. And that's through the whole process. Like every book you put out there, there's reviews and whatnot. Which is funny, as a ghostwriter, I actually go look at the reviews. And I don't look at the 5-star ones. I'm like, fuck the 5-star ones. Fuck the 1-star ones. I look at the 3-star ones because those usually give me constructive feedback. And I'm like, yeah, that thing where you're like, you wish I would have shown more than told more in the suspense book that I wrote. That's because I didn't know anything about the topic I was writing about. So I had to tell you about those parts so I could get to the sexy bits. I do find those helpful, but
that's another thing that can be super intimidating. Like, I know that there are plenty of big name authors who just don't they'll get online long enough to post things, but they don't really interact online because for their own sake, they don't want to see all of the negative shit. And I don't blame them. Like, I wouldn't want to be scrolling through TikTok, just for a brain rot session and boom, oh, Rebecca Lynch, she's horrible. She can't put together 2 words, blah, 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 blah. And then just be able to keep scrolling and not be like, well, first of all, buddy, like, it's seeing the things that, because people are brutal.
If I ever become famous, I'm going to hire my dad to be my personal troll. We'll mess with anybody who messes with me.
He would do it too.
Yeah, well, he does it for free now. So if I paid him to do that stuff, he was the first internet troll. I say that sincerely too, which is kind of devastating, but that is what that is. So this kind of is what, along the lines of what we've been talking about, but how much of the workload actually falls on the author? I feel like that's also a giant myth. We were talking about having marketing support from a traditional publisher, even indie publishers, but like as an indie publisher, I relied on my authors to market because I couldn't do everything. I tried. I did my best. Like I used to have, I'd ask 72 author anthology, and I'd ask each one of them, fill out an interview for me and give me 1 blog post to post during our launch and afterwards for marketing purposes. And I posted 3 blogs a week, doing an excerpt, a blog post, a guest post, and an interview from people in a kind of offset schedule in order to market. And that barely did anything, unfortunately. A lot of the free stuff you can do as a publisher is only to your own audience. And if you can't, which for me is mostly writers. So it was hard to breach past that. And there were some authors who could really pull that in, but really, like, if you look at it now, a lot of the traditional publishers, a lot of the new things that they're putting out with special editions and stuff are authors who made it big on TikTok.
Yeah.
And now they're just taking their book and they're not even editing it, and they're giving a new cover and they're sending it out again. So
I think too, another thing, and I think this kind of sticks in people's heads because for a long time, internet marketing wasn't a thing. But when you walk into a bookstore, what are the first things that you see? And so having somebody to negotiate on your behalf that your book gets on that first round table with the big old sign, and because that can
Mhm.
be really intimidating. Like, I mean, it's one thing to walk into an independent bookstore and ask them, can we come to an agreement? Can we do this? Can we do that? And work that up. But trying with something like Barnes and Nobles, that's trickier.
Although they do have a best of TikTok table now in most Barnes and Nobles.
Do they?
So
I haven't been in one in a while. There's a big one over in Georgetown. I keep meaning to get over to, but I haven't been there yet.
the last one I was in, I actually mentioned that to one of the workers. Like, this is exciting because I know where they're published and how they get access to it because I've done all of that stuff. But like
Yeah.
Ingram Spark specifically makes it accessible to big dealers like Barnes and Noble. So even Draft to Digital, I think, does that as well, at least on their ebooks to be downloaded. But I just like the step that we're taking, that people who are self-published and have their books available and have published or marketed themselves well enough are showing up in brick and mortar, well-known. Give me the companies. There we go. I couldn't get the word again. Big companies and like having their stuff showcased, which is super cool, way different than it was again 10, 15 years ago. And that gives me hope for
I think something
self-published.
that trips a lot of people up too is that a lot of people don't understand or know how to implement the difference in between marketing and sales, because while they're very closely intertwined, they're not the same thing. And I think that makes people feel like a little bit squidgy because sales can feel kind of slimy, because a lot of sales practices are emotions based, and playing off people's emotions to make money just feels gross.
Yeah.
So, having that difference, particularly when it's, this isn't your 9 to 5, you're not trying to market or sell an item that somebody else came up with that you're not emotionally attached to. Like, this is a piece of you. And now you have to figure out, how do I get people to enjoy this piece of me enough that it keeps getting more and more exposure? And that can be really hard to do. Because now not only are you dealing with insecurities as a marketer or a salesperson in general, but also because it is a very personal thing. It's, and I try to keep in mind something that I learned when I was earning my marketing degree. The difference in marketing, not marketing and sales, but marketing and branding, is that branding is who you are and marketing is how you introduce yourself. And so, taken in that context, the branding is, not necessarily you as an author, but like, you have your trilogy or whatever, right? Branding is, who is that trilogy as an entity? What is it that makes it who it is without giving the whole story away? And then marketing is, how does that trilogy introduce itself to the wider market? And you are just the avenue for which that happens.
And the branding also is like how you design the cover, like you said, the way you introduce it, all of the things that go into making the book look and feel the way it does.
Accurate, because there's nothing that drives me more crazy than a book cover and a blurb that are not accurate to the story.
One of my ghostwriting books had a Asian man in it, because I don't want to be too specific. And one of the reviews was like, "Why the dude was Asian? Why wasn't one of the guys on the cover Asian? Like, why wasn't one of them redhead? Because one of them wasn't redhead either. Like, they all looked the same, and that drives. As a self-publisher, I wouldn't let that happen.
Right.
But I write for a client, so like they get to do whatever they want with the covers. But I'm like, yeah, as a reader, that really bothers me when it doesn't match what's
That
inside.
tells me that they chose that cover based on what aesthetic they thought would sell, as opposed to being honest about the story.
And that's once again very similar to our talk about tropes. I'm going to tell you what tropes they are. Well, that doesn't tell me much about what the actual story is going to be like.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like if I pick up a story and it's supposed to be like a suspense, a thriller, a horror, don't put a cartoon on the cover.
I don't much like the cartoons for romance.
That
I
drives
like
me crazy.
illustrated, which is people confuse the two of them, but like the faceless cartoon kind of things that they have, not into, but like the
Mhm.
actual like well drawn and rendered ones, like an actual illustrated piece of art for your cover. I'm okay with those. I like those because they usually
Illustrated
the
is
best
one thing, but
showcase.
if it looks like something that I could feasibly have picked up at the age of 15 and had it been appropriate for a school library, it does not belong on a romance book, particularly if it's a spicy romance book.
Oh goodness. I'm looking through my questions again. So we're getting close to a time where we should probably wrap things up. But well, we've already talked about that. So even though I know you're a new author, what kind of advice, if you could pick one piece of advice to give somebody who's just starting their first book, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Um, you hear a lot of advice about sit down and write every day. It doesn't matter how much, but sit down and write. I think that encompassed in that is things like, if you're doing things like world building, and no matter what you're writing, there's going to be research. So, that to me, if you're sitting down to do the research, if you're sitting down to look at the reference books, if you're sitting down to create a world, any of that counts as part of writing your novel, right? Because it's all support there. But an addendum to that, I think, is that, if you're going to make the commitment to sit down and write every day, you need to look at it as you're making a commitment to yourself. Because if you look at it as, oh, I want to write this book and I want to get it out on, I want to make sales and blah, 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 then it becomes nothing more than a job,
Mm-hmm.
one that you're not immediately getting paid for. So you're not seeing the immediate return on it, on the investment that you're putting into it. If you look at it as a commitment to you, to yourself, there's more of an immediate feeling of that return. Like, because you're investing in yourself, you're not investing in something that you hope to sell, if that makes
Yes. You're making a promise to yourself, and you sitting your butt in that chair to do whatever it is keeping a promise to
sense.
yourself more than it's, I'm going to make a product to sell. Absolutely.
Right.
With that. I'm trying to think of a piece of advice, a single one. And it's,
I know there's so many, like you could pull them out of a hat.
I know one of my favorites is like, don't wait for things to be perfect. A lot of the time, and this is like twofold. One, your book's never going to be perfect. You're going to come back to it in 5 years. You're going to read it again. You'll be like, I could have done that. Like, you're never going to be satisfied with it. You could edit it to death. Like, you can. And I have to have like talks with authors all the time. I'm like, get it to the point where you're happy with it. It might not be perfect, but if you're happy with the story, words can be tweaked every day to say something, but it's essentially going to say the same thing.
Storytelling versus writing.
Yes. And also, don't feel like you need to be perfect while you're drafting. You cannot make nothing better. You have to have something there to make better. I know, you know what, as a writer, if I write chronologically, and if I don't know what I'm doing next and I don't like what I've done before, like, I can't get past that point. I have to fix what I've got to make it work before I can move on, or figure out what's next before I don't jump around, which is really, really frustrating in the moment when I'm drafting. However, 9 out of 10 times of the books that I've written, and I say that it's probably a smaller percentage than that, or hold on, a larger percentage of that, because there's only one book that I had to go back and I fucking hated adding stuff to it. But when I finish a draft, it's pretty much just complete. I don't have to do any developmental editing after the fact. There's only been one book that I've had to do a lot of that in, and I freaking hated it. I wish I just toughened it out when I was in the moment instead of going, oh, I'll fix that later. But I've also written a lot of books. My first two books, my first book I wrote 4 or 5 different times before I got to the draft that I wanted. And book 2, I was halfway there before I wrote down all my little note cards and had to like rearrange it before I got it in a place where I could continue writing it. And so like, but if I hadn't started it, if I hadn't been working on it, if I hadn't kept going and like touched it every day and not worried about it being absolutely perfect in the moment where I had the inspiration and the momentum and the mindset and everything else to write it, I mean, without having that and actually doing the work, you're not going to have anything to make pretty, because I think was it Hemingway said it. The first draft of everything is shit.
Yeah.
It's fine. Your first draft can be shit. You can do
There
something.
was a Big Bang Theory episode
I'm watching that again.
where Howard is talking about how the first kid is like a pancake to throw away. And I think about that a lot when I'm going through my draft. But I think another thing, and I know we asked for one piece of advice, but I think this one's kind of important too, is don't be afraid to talk about your project.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it to your friends, talk about it to your family, join a writing community, even if it's a small writing community, and talk to them about it. Don't be afraid to leave a comment here and there on, TikToks that show up from other authors or from readers. Peruse Reddit, leave comments there, post on Reddit. Don't be afraid to talk about your project, because if you're afraid to talk about your project for fear of, oh, I'm going to sound silly because I haven't figured it all out, or, whatever else it is that's bothering you about it, you're never going to figure that out. So, just don't be afraid to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. That also makes me think of one more thing, and it's more of a, I guess, marketing selling standpoint. A lot of people are afraid to talk about spoilers in their books. And as long as you're not giving away the ending, you can pretty much spoil everything else and talking about it to readers. Because all you're going to do is going to be like, I want to know how that happened. But you said, what happened? I want to know how that happened. Because that's those juicy bits. Again, other than the big reveal at the end, you never want to really give that one away. But everything
or if
else,
you have some really interesting ways to torture your characters, leave those quiet.
Even some of those, honestly, because you never know what's going to pique somebody's interest. And the juicy parts, the ones, the twists and the turns, and the parts where you're like, oh, I don't want to share that quite yet, are probably the parts that are going to pique people's interest. Like those are the parts that people want to know about. So it's not a detriment to share details like that. And even if you're afraid, oh, someone else is going to take it before I get published, they're not going to write it the way you did.
And you know what? It's okay if you wind up with like a little bit of spaghetti too, like where if somebody asks you what your book is about and you get really excited, which is awesome, be excited, be very excited about your project, because if you're not, nobody else will be. Yes. But if you're like, oh, well, it starts with this character and they have to do this, 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 and this, and then you wind up on this whole, like, trying to connect your major plot points for somebody, and they kind of get that look on their face like, if you notice their eyes are glazing over, stop yourself and think, what is the most interesting plot point that I have so far? And that is what you should talk about.
Yes. Or most interesting character.
Most interesting character, or, even if that most interesting character is a horse with an attitude, that's fine. Look at the movie Tangled. Who was everybody's favorite character? The flippin' horse.
Mm-hmm. It works.
Or another great example of that, Mulan, the animated one. Who was everybody's favorite two characters? The cricket and the dragon.
Yes. Side characters are fun.
I'm having fun with a few of mine.
We will save that for another discussion, though. Any last thing you want to say before we sign off? Do we want to say what your TikTok handle is, like where people can find your journey? I know every week we meet here to talk about things, but do you remember? Her TikTok's linked, by the way, below. But I also know you have a blog.
I do. So my blog, I actually haven't done too much about, it's not my author page. I haven't done one of those yet. So this is kind of more following my life as, as a mom, as an Army wife. But you can find that at www.mylynchlife.com. If you're interested, it's in progress, as most things are. But I've got some blog posts on there, talking about, how things have changed for us in the last 2 years, both good and bad. I've got some of my photography projects are on there. I haven't updated those in a while. And then from there's links to the Lynch Life, TikTok, and Instagram pages. There might be one for the Facebook page too. I can't remember. My author page, I haven't linked. My author TikTok, I haven't linked anywhere yet because I made like two or three, 2 or 3 videos and got really lazy. So I really need to get better about that. But
go follow her to pressure her into doing more TikTok. Go follow her. You love that?
I don't even remember the handle right now because I'm so tired. So remind me next time.
So I'm gonna go find it.
I think it's something like author Rebecca Lynch. I don't know.
I've been very inconsistent, honestly, with my YouTube specifically. Like, you would think, oh, that's not what I think I wanted, maybe. It's so bad when I do this and I'm researching something while I'm trying to talk. Yeah, it's author.rebecca.l.lynch.
Yeah, that.
So yes, it is linked. I have it down there. I've been very inconsistent about my YouTube, which is my favorite thing to do. I haven't even put my TBRs up for the last 2 months, which is sacrilege for me. I always have my TBRs up. But I was watching somebody who's making money as a self-published author, and she's like, can pick one, be consistent. And doing what I like to do on YouTube, which is more author community-ish, isn't going to sell my books. So I have to get back on TikTok too. And I'm thinking TikToks and YouTube shorts. I have realized, side note, with my job that I have, I've been doing read-alongs, and I used to do full-blown videos of my analysis, like 10, 15-minute videos. I've been doing 1 to 2 minute videos in the short format and doing it the same vlog style where I'm like reacting for a couple seconds and then it changes clips. I make a lot of funny faces and people tend to like that. So I'm going to see if that works for my books.
It's the eyebrows. You have like super insane expressive eyebrows, which is awesome.
Yes. When my eyes get big, like that's a fun thing too. I think I was in one of mine, I was going, so I mean, you know, and I put that on because there was a moment where I knew it would fit.
One Dark Window. Have you started that? Like, where?
I haven't. I would like to talk about that next week, but I have to like get my ass in gear and actually read it. Yes.
I finished my first read through, but I want to go back through like with the, with the talking points in mind so that I can kind of
talk about it.
And yeah, I was just trying to make it through the first time out because, I've been in a reading slump, so everything I've picked up, I'm just kind of like, eh.
Did this get you out of your reading slump? Did you enjoy it at least? Okay.
Enough so that I'm probably going to read the sequel.
Okay. I mean, that's a decent read if you want to read the sequel. I'd say between 3 and 4.
Yeah. It's definitely not like a burning urge, like, oh my God, I have to know what happens, but.
That's good to know. I think I can't remember if it's my first one of hers. No, it would be my second book. Her first book that I read of hers, I liked. So,
but again, I mean, that just goes back to like, that's me personally and where I'm just at mentally. That has absolutely like that's more to do with me than it does to do with the author and her work and her style. But
and I also feel like when you buddy read something like we're doing, like when we actually get to talk about it, because again, obviously I haven't read it yet. I find that when other people point things out that I really didn't hit me the first time, I'm like, oh wait, I didn't think of that. Yeah. And it makes the book more enjoyable. So hopefully we can do that too. But let's catch up behind the scenes in a second. Let's tell everybody else goodbye. So next week we're going to talk about One Dark Window. I'm going to make myself read this thing because I don't have any boxes to pack this week. So that was my major thing. I had to launch and to pack boxes. So, and I have a crink in my neck, but that's something else. Anyways, thank y'all for being here. Let us know what your publishing questions are, what your beliefs are. If you want to know what we think about any part of the process, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below, or let us know what part of the process you're in. I want to know that too. Yeah. All right. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.